Good evening, I'm Ian Hannamansing. 1 week after the horrific shootings, Nova Scotians are trying to heal.
It means so much. It means a lot.
Finding different ways to honor the victims and the search for answers. Growing concerns about domestic violence in the midst of a pandemic.
His most powerful tool, isolation, is now endorsed by the state.
A cautious reopening in some parts of the country, the pressure and the pitfalls.
We've got to try to get it right this first time.
And the race to save lives in labs all over the world.
The sooner we have a vaccine, the sooner we can prevent people from dying.
This is The National. It has now been a week since Nova Scotians woke to a nightmare, a gunman on the loose. We now know he killed 22 people and when, but why is still a key unanswered question. The RCMP wants answers, so too do all those left mourning. The shock may be fading, but grief is still pulling people to memorials to pay their respects. Kayla Hounsell shows us the other ways loved ones are finding to mourn and honor the lives lost.
As police comb the area around Portapique today, trying to determine what led to the mass murder of 22 people, those who knew them and those who didn't are searching for ways to grieve.
I believe we came as a family because we know how many families are hurting right now.
Because they can't gather due to the global pandemic, families who lost loved ones are finding creative ways to honor them. Last night, a huge motorcade took an hour to pass Joey Weber's home, a lover of stock car racing. And tonight, Kristen's last ride. VON workers followed the route Kristen Beaton was driving when she was killed by the gunman. At the end, her husband and 2-year-old son handed out 300 donated N95 masks, supporting her call for more PPE for frontline workers during COVID-19.
It means so much. It means a lot. I haven't really brought my son out to the site or around much, but I brought him to this because I want him to see all Mummy's co-workers and that Mummy's voice is getting heard.
Lisa McCulley's family did hold a funeral today. The teacher's memory honored via webcast. No gathering.
By our nature as human beings, ritual is coded into our DNA. And one of the most important aspects of our ritualization to find meaning in life and in things like this is the ability to congregate.
In the absence of that, so many offers of love, like this fly past, crews doing critical search and rescue training with a little something extra.
This gives them that reminder that there's beauty in the land around them, there's beauty in the hearts of people in Nova Scotia, and that we'll all be there for them, strong together.
Back in Portapique, at what was the scene of a terrible massacre, there is now also a growing expression of grief from people determined to show togetherness, if only one by one. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
These are the 22 people now gone, the victims being mourned. But getting through that grief is just one challenge that lies ahead for people in Nova Scotia. There is anger and anxiety as well. Let's bring in Tom Murphy, not just a co-anchor of our CBC News in Nova Scotia, but a longtime resident as well. And so, Tom, 1 week later, how's your province doing?
Well, Ian, as you know, there's an arc to these kinds of tragedies, really. It goes from shock to grief to anger, mourning, and hopefully you get to healing. And I'd say people are probably somewhere in the middle there right now here in Nova Scotia. I know that some of the families are at the very practical stages of trying to plan funerals and wakes at a time where they can't be together because of social distancing. It's really difficult on them, and these are going to be difficult days ahead for sure.
And let's talk about the RCMP. They lost a member here. They responded to the emergency, but Tom, they're facing some questions as well.
Yeah, tons of respect for the officers who responded that day and put their lives on the line for sure. But there's a couple things here. First of all, no one faults the RCMP for this, but people are openly asking the question, what would I do if I was stopped by the RCMP right now after this shooter was masquerading as a police officer? So there's a little trust issue there for sure, but also around the emergency alert. There was one that was not declared that day. It might have saved some lives. The police, by the way, had one here on Friday and an unrelated gun incident, and it didn't amount to anything, but it left people jittery, so it kind of gives you some insight as to how people are feeling. But the RCMP and Superintendent Darren Campbell, who has Cape Breton roots, by the way, vows to do better.
I hear the families of those victims. We hear them full force. They have every right to ask those questions. They have every right to be angry. You know, public trust, as I said, is so important, and it's not something that it's gained easily. It takes a lot of work, and it's lost very easily.
As for Nova Scotians, they have been scarred by tragedy before, Ian. I'm thinking of Swiss Air, mining disasters, people lost at sea. Always found a way to get through it. They will this time as well. It's just going to take some time, Ian.
All right, Tom, thank you. Turning now to our other top story, the ongoing battle against COVID-19. Let's take a look at the situation tonight as Canada closes in on 50,000 confirmed cases. Alberta reported 247 new infections today, while Saskatchewan and Manitoba have recorded just 4 each. Atlantic Canada also doing pretty well, 8 in Nova Scotia, just 1 in Newfoundland and Labrador, but it remains worse in central Canada. Quebec recording at least 840 new cases, Ontario tallying 437, pushing the total number of known cases there above 14,000. Ontario's education minister has announced publicly funded schools will remain closed until at least the end of May.
That extension will provide the province, the government, more time, sufficient time to review the data and the modeling so that ultimately students remain safe and staff remain safe should they return to school at some point this year or at any time beyond.
Ontario made the call based on advice from its chief medical health officer. There are no plans yet to extend the school calendar. Now, owners of small businesses that have been shut down by COVID-19 are desperate to know when they'll be back in business. Canada's 2 biggest provinces will announce their plans on that soon. Talia Ricci looks at how people are holding up in the meantime.
The amount of money we are losing on a day-to-day basis is insane.
It's tough to even think about the future right now for a company like Inc. Entertainment, which runs bars, restaurants, and music festivals.
Mentally and physically and emotionally, we're completely drained.
Anxiety spilled onto the streets this weekend in Toronto. Residents protesting coronavirus shutdowns.
I kind of just went to bed one night and woke up and I was on a different planet.
Reopening the country is a complicated undertaking, but it doesn't stop Canadians from wondering when it'll happen.
I don't think we should be talking about reopening any parts of the economy if we do not have a strong plan.
Ontario and Quebec are announcing their frameworks for reopening this week.
There's no one who wants the economy open more than I do, but I'm not going to put people at risk.
We really can't afford 2 waves or 3 waves.
This business expert says a nightmare scenario would be loosening restrictions too soon, potentially resulting in multiple waves and a bigger financial burden for the government.
They can't put everybody on their payroll for a year or 2.
New Brunswick hasn't been hit as hard. The province's phased COVID-19 recovery plan started Friday.
With proper physical distancing, people can now enjoy outdoor spaces.
But he also said bigger changes will take time.
Large gatherings such as festivals and concerts will not be allowed until after December 31st.
This is, I would say, 6 to 18 months to get back to where we were.
This week, Canada announced a new immunity task force, which will focus on how widely the virus has spread across the country. Some of those findings might also help determine when things will open again. Talia Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
For those relying on getting their groceries delivered, that return to normal can't come soon enough. Huge demand has led to long waits, sudden cancellations, and hidden costs that not everyone can afford, especially vulnerable seniors. Rosa Marcatelli looks at that struggle.
Here is my fridge.
Angela Keller gave us a video tour of what's not in her fridge. The 70-year-old was told her online order with Loblaws would arrive in 10 days, only to have it postponed several times and then flat out canceled.
I get an email saying, your delivery has been canceled. Please click this link to reorder. And my first thought was, my goodness, I'm going to have to wait another week and a half to 2 weeks.
Loblaws says online orders have doubled in recent weeks, but cancellations are rare. Grocery stores and their delivery partners are working to catch up with that demand. But for now, they lack the staff and technology to keep up, says this food economics expert.
Orders, all of a sudden, we've seen this huge spike, and they've been overwhelmed in terms of the demand.
Demand is one thing, cost another. Medea Chaudhry placed an online order while she and her family were in quarantine after returning from the UK. She ordered through Instacart. It's a popular third-party shopping and delivery company. It advertises in-store prices for many of the stores it delivers for. Customers usually only see the Instacart receipt, but in Chaudhry's case, the original store receipt was also left with her order. And when she compared the two, she realized she was charged more than 20% extra per item, in addition to service and delivery fees.
I felt a little taken advantage of because to fulfill my obligations from coming back from overseas, I had to use an online delivery.
Instacart tells CBC its pricing reflects standard Shoppers Drug Mart store pricing. And in Chaudhry's case, it says in-store promotions were not available online. Overall, experts say expect problems with the sudden surge in demand for these services. Their advice when ordering groceries for delivery or pickup, plan weeks ahead and look to smaller retailers like bakeries and specialty stores in your area. Some are now taking orders over the phone or by email and have started delivering. Rosa Marcatelli, CBC News, Calgary.
While millions of Canadians are staying home to stop the spread of COVID-19, for some, self-isolation comes with its own risks. Today, Canada's Chief Public Health Officer said in a statement, "I realize these times are tough for everyone. If you're struggling at home with anxiety, fear, violence, depression, problematic substance use, or any other mental health concerns, there is help." Domestic violence is one of those issues. Ashley Burke takes a closer look at the concerning numbers across the country.
No matter where you live, you should be staying home as much as you possibly can.
A message to keep Canadians safe, but for some, it's doing the exact opposite.
Unfortunately, for some, being at home means not being safe.
It's an opportunity for abusers to twist self-isolation measures to empower themselves. The result is an uptick in domestic violence.
She's being asked to stay home. And his most powerful tool, isolation, is now endorsed by the state.
Canada's Minister of Women and Gender Equality says COVID-19 has only made the issue worse.
What we're hearing from provinces and territories and our experts on the front lines is an increase of somewhere between 20 to 30% in gender-based violence and domestic violence rates.
In some places, calls to shelters have multiplied nearly 400%. But in some rural regions, they've actually dropped dramatically. And that's concerning too.
I'll be honest with you, I'm really scared because I think what we're seeing is a scary silence.
McGuinness believes her shelter in rural Alberta is seeing less demand because women have fewer opportunities to escape their abuser, and they're scared to reach out.
The calls that we have received have indicated that they are in very dangerous situations. You know, we're having reports of women being strangled and threatened with weapons.
Others worry women don't know shelters across Canada remain open or fear their children could catch COVID-19 if they go to one.
So it's basically violence against women or COVID-19, and which one are you going to self-isolate from in one sense?
The government has rolled out $50 million to help frontline organizations and is looking to do more. Officials say if it is not safe for you to be at home, you shouldn't be there, that your immediate safety is more important than physical distancing. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
To try to contain COVID-19, British Columbia has ordered the clearing of several tent cities. People living there will be moved into hotels for the time being, but as Briar Stewart reports, not everyone likes that idea.
Vancouver's Oppenheimer Park has become home for a few hundred people. Officials have always considered conditions here unsafe.
We do think there may be some exposure here at the park.
Now even more so because of COVID-19. That's why the BC government has issued an order to move people out of this encampment as well as 2 others in Victoria. They're being put up in hotels left empty because of the pandemic and community centres.
That's a good idea.
Jay Duncan has lived in this park for 3 months and helps out in the overdose prevention site. Addiction is rampant here. This afternoon, paramedics were called to resuscitate someone. The government says there will be supports in place at the hotels. People can even get access to a safe supply of drugs, which Duncan says is critical.
Extremely. Otherwise, it's going to be chaos. Yeah, it's not a good idea to cut people off.
Outreach workers say they're going to start today moving people out, and the goal is to move 15 to 20 people every day. They hope to have everyone settled into the new accommodations within 2 weeks. But it's likely some will not want to go. Outreach teams are working with the residents and will help with the move.
Those relationships always help to make things go more smoothly and a little less anxiety, but we fully understand that those emotions can change.
Advocates say while some are grateful for the new accommodation, many others in the province need help.
And we've got people that are vulnerable here, but there's more vulnerable people on Hastings Street, in alleys, and elsewhere where you aren't able to have a tent up 24 hours a day.
It's not clear what will happen if people won't willingly relocate, but officials are hoping those here are convinced it's the safest option for now. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Vancouver.
A significant announcement today from the U.S. epicenter of the pandemic. New York State says 367 people died of coronavirus in the past day. That is the first time the figure has fallen below 400 this month. Across the United States, there are more than 960,000 confirmed cases, with the number of people killed approaching 55,000. Still, as Paul Hunter shows us, there are those who are losing patience with sheltering in place.
Think of it this way. The pressure in some parts of America to reopen now is so great that in Southern California today, they demonstrated to try to force the beach open immediately, even though it's now scheduled to reopen tomorrow.
Open the beaches. This is crazy. This is our right.
In some states, the reopening is already underway. Georgia, for example, in the face of experts who insist it's too soon and risks a COVID-19 spike. Still, even New York is now thinking about it, maybe from mid-May, if the state's recent decline in new cases continues.
Phase 1 of reopening will involve construction and manufacturing activities. And within construction and manufacturing, those businesses that have a low risk.
Donald Trump, meanwhile, was relatively quiet this weekend. There were no briefings as he was being pilloried for his comments on the coronavirus broadly. Last night, Brad Pitt as Anthony Fauci interpreting the president.
When he said everyone can get a test, what he meant was almost no one.
And even though Trump walked back his suggestion last week that toxic disinfectant might help kill the virus in humans, calls to poison centers this weekend seeking clarity spiked. One of his senior advisors on coronavirus today suggested it's time to focus on fresh developments, not disinfectant.
I think I've made it clear that this was amusing as you described, but I want us to move on to be able to get information to the American people that can help them protect each other.
As for those briefings, there's some suggestion now in the fallout from the disinfectant comment that Trump himself may no longer take part in them. As he tweeted this weekend, not worth the time and effort. Paul Hunter, CBC News, Washington.
Where is Kim Jong-un? There have been a lot of rumors recently about his health, starting after the North Korean leader reportedly underwent heart surgery earlier this month. Anita Bath is following this developing story for us tonight. Anita.
Ian, one thing is clear, and that's that nothing is clear. North Korea is an authoritarian state. Very little unfiltered information comes out, but total silence is raising suspicion that Kim Jong-un could be critically ill or even dead.
He's kind of portrayed in godlike terms, and therefore any illness would be seen as a sign of weakness and fallibility on the part of the leader. Usually, if there were this kind of speculation internationally, they would take some steps to reassure people that he's okay and just temporarily out of commission.
Kim was last seen in public on April 11th. Today, a top South Korean policy advisor insists the North Korean leader is alive and well. Researchers say this satellite image on April 21st shows a train that probably belongs to Kim, parked in Wonsan, where the leader has a compound, but that's all we know. Now, the biggest concern is what happens next if he should die. Now, since the 1940s, North Korea has been ruled by a family dynasty, but now there is no clear succession plan. His sister, who already has a powerful role, is likely disqualified because of her gender, and his older brother has shown little interest. Experts worry a power struggle could lead to social unrest in a country with an arsenal of nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles. That could have big implications for the rest of the world. Ian?
Thanks, Anita. Scientists around the world are racing to find a COVID-19 vaccine, including right here in Canada.
The sooner we have a vaccine, the sooner we can prevent people from dying.
Next on The National, this country's role in a global push to save lives. Plus, we check in with 4 Canadians finding a new sense of hope during a pandemic.
There will be some memories that come out of this for a lot of families.
It's all very inspiring to listen to.
And Canada's biggest stars salute our frontline workers.
We cannot thank all of you.
I want to send all my love.
We'll be right back. This week, the Prime Minister announced more than $1 billion for medical research and testing to battle COVID-19. Millions of that will be directed at what is now the holy grail of public health, a vaccine. And as Joanna Remiliotis explains, Canada is front and center in the global race to find one.
There is only so much safety in the emptiness.
Canada is in retreat and in a race against time to find a way out.
There is a real sense of urgency here. And so this is really, a race against the disease.
In the global sprint for a vaccine, Volker Gertz is leading this country's front from the University of Saskatchewan. He and his team are working around the clock and under pressure to move even faster.
The sooner we have a vaccine, the sooner we can prevent people from dying.
Vito Intervac is Canada's vaccine nerve centre and is already at a key phase, one of a handful of labs in the world ready to test a vaccine on animals. Next month, a big reveal. Ferrets will be exposed to the new coronavirus to see if the vaccine candidate works.
People are really helping.
A potential turning point for Canada and the world.
And I think the concern that we all have at the moment is whether there's another phase to this or not. And so having a vaccine for the next phase is absolutely critical.
Gertz's team is part of the World Health Organization's effort to halt the coronavirus's deadly spread. He's on weekly calls, exchanging data with scientists from around the world. And researchers are sharing their work on medical servers in real time.
This is a worldwide problem, and this is a worldwide issue that we should solve together. The most important thing in all of this is not to be first.
Virologist Paul Duprex from the University of Pittsburgh is part of that same WHO vaccine network. He says working together is speeding up the process to find a successful vaccine among the dozens in development.
And I'm really glad that we've got lots and lots of different options, because you know what's going to happen. Those vaccines are going to fall at different stages in the testing process. So therefore, if we have backups upon backups upon backups, that allows us to get something across the finish line.
It's critically important to do it faster.
From her office in Toronto, infectious disease expert Alison McGeer says speeding up the research process could save lives.
Normally people would say, well, I'm just not sure about that and I want to be absolutely sure about it. Now there's a good reason for doing it differently. And if you do it differently and it works, then you've learned something and you can make processes for developing vaccines faster in general, which we'd all agree would be a good thing.
Back in Saskatoon, if the potential vaccine passes the animal test next month, human trials will follow in the fall. A vaccine could be ready in a year. For the world, Gertz says, and especially for Canada.
We're a Canadian team making a vaccine for Canadians, and so it's our highest priority to make sure that this vaccine will be available for Canadians.
Only then, he says, can science catch up with a disease that is still outrunning it. Joanna Brumeliotis, CBC News, Toronto.
It is time to answer some of your COVID-19 questions, and Dr. Michael Curry is joining us tonight, an emergency room doctor at Delta Hospital here in Metro Vancouver. So, Dr. Curry, first question this evening. What is the latest advice for wearing a mask if you're healthy?
As we all know, this has been a controversial question, and the answers have been changing. The newest research seems to show that there's a slight reduction in people transmitting the COVID-19 virus when they wear the mask. So the current recommendations are that you can wear them if you wish to do so, but it's not necessary. The key things are maintaining social distancing, and if you are sick, staying home.
All right, on to the second question. I rarely get the flu. Does this mean I'm more likely to have mild COVID symptoms if I get it?
I'd love to say yes, but the answer is no. If you're not prone to getting the flu, it's either because your body's got a good immune system that's been well trained through immunization or past infections to fight off the flu, and the COVID-19 virus is a totally different virus than the influenza virus. The other possibility is that you practice very good hygiene and that you tend not to get infected by the flu. While practicing good hygiene will reduce your chances of getting COVID-19, it doesn't mean that you'll get over it more quickly if you are unfortunately infected.
I know you're heading into the emergency room tonight. Just before you go, just tell us, what have you been seeing lately at Delta Hospital?
So the patient volume is actually down considerably. It's actually one of my slower times working in the emergency department. We are still getting COVID patients showing up, but our ability to care for them is still maintained. We have excess capacity because we have flattened the curve. The other thing is that if people do have a medical emergency, we have set up the emergency department in a way that will keep you safe. So as always, if you've got a medical emergency, feel safe and feel able to come into your local emergency department.
Yeah, a really important message right across the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ian. Have a good night.
As we've mentioned, we'll be asking your questions about COVID-19 each night, so you can send those to us. Message us directly on Instagram at CBC The National, or you can send us an email at covid@cbc.ca. It's become a sadly familiar story across Canada. A long-term care facility overwhelmed by an outbreak of COVID-19. Rafi Boudjikanian looks at what happened at one home in Alberta.
I find comfort in knowing that he's with my mom.
Cherie McPhillamy didn't know her dad was sick until she got a call from an Alberta Health Services nurse last Sunday.
She phoned me and informed me, she's like, your dad's not doing well and you really need to get here. And I was questioning, what?
86-year-old resident François Brochu was among the dozens at Manoir du Lac Care Home in McLennan, Alberta, to test positive for COVID-19. 2 days later, the province took over the home. Nobody told McPhillamy about the diagnosis until 2 days after that. She raced in from Saskatchewan and as she was driving, got a second call telling her he had died.
He suffered alone.
Now she's left with questions. We know that 14 workers from the facility attended the same birthday party in mid-March. Soon after, one of them tested positive for coronavirus. The others went into quarantine. That left Director of Operations Carla Anderson scrambling with few workers. She even brought in her adult children to help out.
I feel like I nursed with my heart and soul, and that there were nights when I stayed up all night.
The provincial health department took over in mid-April. It said proper procedures were not followed in the home.
Things like upon entering and leaving the facility, people go through a screening procedure to ensure that they're not going to carry the virus in or out of the facility.
The unfamiliarity of new caretakers, yet another challenge for residents.
The ones now are all new. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how to maneuver me.
The province says it has 60 to 70 people working at the home now. Not much comfort for Claudette Sunshine. Her father lived here too and was first to die during the COVID-19 outbreak. Rafi Boudjikanian, CBC News, Edmonton.
Next, we're going to check in on 4 Canadians who've been sharing their COVID-19 experience.
Alexis, you continue to work and parent from home. How's that going?
I feel like we've reached maybe a new normal.
They tell us how life and their perspective on the pandemic is changing.
I just want to see my friends. I want to walk the streets again. So I gotta be patient.
Some familiar faces, part of an all-Canadian lineup tonight, sharing a virtual stage to thank frontline workers.
Thank you. Thank you. We cannot thank all of you enough.
A chance to raise money for Food Banks Canada and release their own version of this classic anthem. The proceeds of which will be going to the Canadian Red Cross's COVID-19 relief effort. Trading live performances for virtual shows is just one of the ways we've had to adapt during this pandemic. Over the past few weeks, some Canadians have brought us into their homes, opening up about their challenges. So tonight we wanted to check in and ask how they're holding up, starting with the owner of a small business.
Hello, my name is Craig McMillan, and this is my restaurant.
Working mom Alexis Wolski.
I am a mom to a very, very active 2.5-year-old.
Long haul trucker Rick Witherall.
My biggest concern is the lack of personal protective equipment.
And international student Ritika Dubé.
I've been so anxious in the past 2 weeks.
They are just some of the Canadians trying to make sense of this new normal. I started by asking Craig if he thought his restaurant might be able to reopen soon.
Well, I'm pretty lucky. I have a fairly large dining room, so I think that I can maintain separation where a lot of small businesses don't have that ability. So I think that we will be able to do that, but I think it is going to be slow going for a while. We're going to see a reluctance on the part of people, even though they do want to get out. And we do need to be concerned about the knock-on effect of having too many people close together and possibly causing another problem.
Yeah. Ritika, when I saw you in your diary, you were talking about feeling pretty anxious. How do you feel now?
I feel way better now. I was thinking that I might not be able to complete my graduation because my internship was postponed and we still don't know when it's going to happen. But then I'm graduating this week. And at this moment, I'm getting used to the whole staying at home thing and like not being anxious and still finding my way through.
Rick, you're on the job right now. Describe for us where you are and what's in your truck.
Right now, I'm in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I'm heading towards New Brunswick. Basically, what's in my truck is my things that keep me safe through the week is, my hand sanitizers and disinfectant wipes. I basically cook most of my meals in my truck just to eliminate the amount of times that I have to leave my truck.
Has it been, and I hate to use the word easy because I'm sure very little out there is easy these days, but has it been relatively easy for you to keep your distance and feel safe while you're out there doing jobs?
For the most part, a couple times I've had individuals come a little too close to my comfort, and I basically just politely said, hey man, just please don't come too close. And he said, oh yeah, I'm sorry, and so yeah, but for the most part, people are getting it. I think both sides of the border. When you go into truck stops, all the major truck stops are really doing their due diligence when it comes to basically putting markers and stuff on the floor. The showers are exceptionally clean. They're going well beyond that, which is great to see.
Alexis, you continue to work and parent from home. How's that going?
I feel like we reached maybe a new normal in the house, and I think my husband and I are getting more used to having everyone here. I think he's acting out a little bit. I think all parents will say that that's happening now, as he understands that he's not going to daycare, we're not seeing friends and family, and when he doesn't get all of the attention, he is acting a little bit out, but he's 2.5, so I think it's to be expected. So we're okay. We're just getting day to day by,
It's all very inspiring to listen to you. So, Greg, last thoughts from you?
I think it's interesting, particularly in Alexis's case. There will be some memories that come out of this for a lot of families. you know, they're becoming more familiar with their kids than they were before, and it may not all be bad. I hope it's not, and that's good.
Ritika?
I think I just needed to change my perspective in this. It's not just me who is suffering through this, and everybody's in the same boat. It just, the moment I started looking at a different perspective, things started making sense, and it is giving me happiness.
And Alexis?
I think everyone sounds a little less fearful and a little bit more strong-willed, a little bit more courageous. So it sounds like we're all doing what's necessary to get through and come out on the other side. And I will actually really miss being with my family so much, but we definitely are enjoying each other's company and grateful to have each other.
Listen to all four of you. Thank you very much, and thank you for letting us kind of peek into your lives.
And next on The National, a coronavirus success story. How does South Korea manage to flatten the curve so effectively? We'll look at that right after the break. South Korea relaxed coronavirus restrictions today on church services. Still, members needed to sign up online for one of the limited seats available. While the country's physical distancing policy remains in place until May 5th, Seoul is giving flexibility to religious and sports facilities. More than 10,000 people have been sickened by the coronavirus, with 240 deaths. Now, that's out of a population of more than 51.5 million people. Terrence McKenna shows us how South Korea kept a lid on COVID spread.
To see how well South Korea is handling this outbreak, have a look at the lineups of passengers arriving at Incheon Airport near Seoul. They have to pass through multiple levels of temperature monitoring and fever checks. There are testing facilities right in the airport. Passengers are told to self-isolate for 14 days. They are required to download a cell phone app to report any symptoms to health authorities, in which case they will be closely monitored. This is just the first line of defense in a massive system to track the virus, and it seems to be working. If you compare the progression of infections in countries like Italy, Spain, the United States, and Canada, Korea was much more successful in containing the spread of the disease, and now has far fewer deaths per million of residents than most infected countries. It didn't start out so well. Back in February, in a religious sect called the Shincheonji Church of Jesus in the southern city of Daegu, a woman now called Patient 31 ignored symptoms of COVID-19 and proceeded to attend large religious ceremonies. By the time she was diagnosed, this super spreader had infected over 5,000 people. Then the secretive church refused to cooperate with medical investigations. Young Sun Kim is a journalist with KBS, the Korean public broadcaster.
This church keeps their followers' identity secret. And initially, they were reluctant to hand over the list of their followers to the authority. That's why, the Korean people were so mad at this church.
Eventually, the church leader prostrated himself before an angry public and apologized profusely. The Korean containment system swung into action to slow the outbreak. Once it is established that someone has a suspected or confirmed case of COVID-19, cell phone and credit card data is used to chart everywhere that person has been lately and every other person they have come close to. The contacts of those people can also be traced almost instantly, giving a much better idea who requires immediate testing. Hoon Sang Lee is a professor of global health security at Yonsei University in Seoul.
They can use big data and AI to analyze their whereabouts. So now it is totally automated. So within 10 minutes, all those information can be gathered automatically. So the contact tracing time had been drastically reduced at this moment.
People also receive cell phone alerts of contacts with infected patients and locations in their neighborhood. Victoria Kim covers South Korea for the Los Angeles Times.
So if there's been a COVID patient in my vicinity, I will get an emergency push alert on my phone that'll tell me they were at this restaurant between the hours of 7:30 and 8:30 last night, or like this particular subway stop at these hours.
This sort of thing will raise privacy and civil rights concerns around the world, but the vast majority of Koreans seem to accept it.
The government keeps the balance between protecting public safety and protecting private information, basically. So the information made to public does not include any private information that allow people to identify whose information they are receiving. So it only says male or female and their age. That's all. So you cannot tell who he or she is actually. And second, the people understand extraordinary measures are necessary during extraordinary time.
Drive-in testing facilities have been set up all over the country and are a godsend for families who can't bring in babysitters or spend hours in the hospital. Robert Kelly is an American professor at Busan University who became famous a few years ago when a BBC interview with him was interrupted by his children, and then his wife chasing them, and the viral video of it went around the world. He loves Korea's drive-in testing facilities.
Taking my kids to a hospital for 2 or 3 hours? Give me a break, right? I mean, forget it. They're going to be climbing the walls and punching each other, and they're going to tear stuff off the walls. I don't know. You literally just sort of pull up into like a parking lot somewhere of a government building or a school or something like that, and you'd wait your turn, and you don't even have to get out of the car, and the guy comes up and they swab your nose or your throat, right? And then they take the biological stuff and go and they do the test and they come back in about 15 or 20 minutes.
Professor Kelly is impressed by the Korean public's cooperation and compliance with outbreak guidelines.
Korea is very centralized and it's very presidentialized, which means once the presidential office decided that this was a big deal and moved against it, the Korean state was able to swing into action pretty rapidly. But the level of social compliance with government recommendations has been very, very high.
Unlike many other countries, there seems to be no huge pressure in Korea to quickly reopen the schools. Bars and restaurants were never closed. South Korea has shown the world that very extensive testing and contact tracing are the most important weapons against this pandemic, lessons that few Western countries seem to have taken to heart. Terence McKenna, CBC News, Toronto.
The moment is next. First, though, a PEI band whose members are separated for the pandemic found a way to connect with fans. Every night they've been reading Anne of Green Gables along with other Canadian artists. They call it Andemic.
Good morning, kindred spirits. Thank you for tuning in.
Chapter 2.
Chapter 11.
I'm reading chapter 33. And it has been a long time since I have read.
My name is Cody Chasten, and I'm a member of the East Pointers. We had just had a tour canceled, and we were going through a box of books. There on the top of the pile was this actual copy of Anne of Green Gables, and I read the first chapter title.
Here we go.
And that's kind of how the whole idea came about. One of the main reasons why you become a musician is because you love interacting with people. There was a lot of bands going live every night on Facebook and Instagram. And that wasn't something that we could do. We've had so many amazing artists from all over the world take part. It's been really, really beautiful. And Anne would make us feel like everything's going to be okay.
From last weekend's tragedy in Nova Scotia, many images have emerged of the victims, of memorials, and some like this that say so much about the horror and the heartbreak. That political cartoon, one of many drawn by Bruce McKinnon this past week for publications including the Halifax Chronicle-Herald. Tonight, in our moment, he reflects on the week that was and the images he drew from it.
The greatest joy you get is making people laugh and making a point at the same time. You can certainly make a point with cartoons like this, but making them laugh is not part of the formula. Heidi Stevenson was a first responder who was there, doing her job, rushing to danger and defending the people of Nova Scotia. So it was very important, I think, to say something about her. The cartoon was to show the influence that such a powerful and respected figure like Heidi Stevenson would have on a young girl.
Bruce has been drawing for the Chronicle-Herald, I think, since I lived in Halifax in the mid-'80s. And so, like Tom said, this is a province that's been through a lot. The Westray mine disaster in the 90s, the Swiss Air crash, and Bruce has drawn through those events as well. And now he's helping Nova Scotia get through this. That is the National for April 26th. Good night.